storage and stormwater capture, groundwater management, increased recycling and reuse, and desalination plants.
There's plenty of water that flows through that just flows right out, that we can reuse, that is high quality, safe, and affordable. And so it's, again, about just being a little bit more resourceful and provide us more capacity to balance the needs as an ag state so that we're not going at each other, urban versus ag.
I don't know. Dick Cheney said you can't conserve your way out of a crisis.
Finally, some great news. In Massachusetts, Republican Governor Charlie Baker signed a sweeping climate and energy bill into law with major provisions to boost offshore wind energy, decarbonize Boston's transit system, allow cities to ban fossil fuel appliances in new buildings, and require all new cars sold in Massachusetts to be zero emissions by 2035.
Well, that's that. I guess Charlie Baker is going to have to be thrown out of the Republican Party. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
So front and center here at Netroots Nation, labor organizing. We just had a conversation with Christian Smalls of the Amazon Labor Union, sharing some of his thoughts on the success that they've had. The other rock stars here at the Netroots conference, the Starbucks workers. And again, lots of attention on bottom-up organizing. Young people, low-wage workers saying, better wages, hours, conditions, voice on the job, kind of important stuff. That's why I've asked Billy Nix to come talk with us. She's one of the Starbucks organizers from New Orleans here at Netroots Nation. Billy, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for talking to me.
So I assume first Netroots Nation?
Yes, very first one.
So thoughts? Any thoughts initially?
It's really cool to be here with like-minded people that are all plugged into the labor issues. We did a caucus earlier where we basically presented these ideas about labor organizing. We had people discuss it, and we learned a lot in that. It's nice to have some fresh perspectives because I feel like I know just about everybody there is to know in the New Orleans labor community. So coming out here and meeting new people with fresh perspectives from other places, like there's this one guy talking about unions and in China, or not China, in Egypt, and it's just completely different for different places.
Yeah, no, at the end of the day, though, it still comes down to wages, hours, conditions, and worker empowerment. And I guess the question I got to start with you, do you have a labor background? Is this something that you were drawn to naturally, or is this something that, out of necessity?
So I did not know anything about union organizing until I got started. I pretty much learned everything that I know from Starbucks Workers United and then labor organizers in New Orleans teaching me. But no, I had no idea. I thought unions were just for factory workers or coal miners, Yeah,
and I think that's the important message out of this. The reason I ask is I ask everyone who gets into organizing, what drew them. Was it a family connection? Was it, in the workplace they said, hey, we've had enough, it's time to make things better. So it's interesting that you say, look, I don't have a background, and I'm now at the front of this. Now you're one of the leaders where you had no background. I think that's an important message for people to understand.
Yeah, anybody can get involved in organizing. In some ways it is difficult, but in many ways it is very easy. You just have to have these conversations with your coworkers.
So what's the conversation? If you're talking to somebody, walk me through as an organizer how you talk to your coworkers.
Yeah, so I mean at Maple Street we're a very close-knit family, so we were constantly talking about our shared issues on the job. Just talk to your coworkers about what issues you're having. Talk about your pay, see if you can find any discrepancies. It's really just about starting these conversations about what can be better in your workplace.
You said talk about your pay. Now, my my wife, when she was the manager of an office billing company. If they were found to be talking about their pay, the process was fire them. Because, oh no, we can't talk about that. That's bad. And it's illegal to do that, but most workers don't understand that. And I think, talking about pay issues, talking about what you make and what you earn, I think is important to bring transparency so that people aren't getting cheated and we don't have the kind of structural problems we see today because we allow it to be held in the dark.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that even without a union, you have certain rights, like striking is a protected activity, bringing your issues to management, having a workplace petition where you just like write down all the issues that you're having, have your coworkers sign it and present it to management with a couple of your other coworkers. These are protected activities, and so is talking about pay and your benefits and things.
Now that's an interesting thing because not too long ago, some Starbucks workers went to the manager and said, "Here are our demands," and then, how did that work out? Accused of kidnapping, accused of harassment. What was the story there?
Yeah, so essentially what these partners did is what's called a march on the boss, where partners stop production. They all come to their manager with their issues. They talk about it. They essentially just hold the manager accountable and ask for immediate resolutions. And somehow the manager got, I'm being kidnapped out of this, even though, like, in the training for this, it's like, oh, you can block the door so the manager doesn't leave. But they didn't do that in that case. The manager just got up and left. So they didn't even try to keep the manager in the store. She was not kidnapped.
And pushed her way past.
Yeah.
And you go, well, wait a second. I'm missing the kidnapping part. But I guess, look, there's no depths that they won't go to, to thwarting your activity.
Yeah, Starbucks is going a little bit off the deep end with their union busting tactics. I feel like every day it just gets worse.
Now, I look at what's going on with Starbucks, and you go, I really think you guys have a shot of, at some point in the very near future, getting a contract, because the media attention, the public relations nightmare that's being caused by just the abuses that have been going on for decades. Look, Howard Schultz and company, they're not doing anything new. It's just that you guys are highlighting what's happening, and it's finally coming to light.
Yeah, and I didn't even know until probably a couple months ago that there was a union push in Starbucks in like the 70s, and Howard Schultz shut it down himself.
Yeah.
And people don't know about that.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Billy Nick. She's an organizer with Starbucks in New Orleans. If folks wanted to get more information, maybe Starbucks workers in our listening areas, where would they go? What would they do?
So our store specifically has an Instagram page called SB Workers Maple Street. I run that Instagram if you want to get in contact and learn how to organize at your Starbucks or at anywhere in the industry. Just send me a direct message. I'll try to get you as much support as I can. Now,
you're in New Orleans, and obviously we've got stations all over the country. Is this, individual stores? These are independent unions that you're building in individual places, or is there some overarching plan to eventually tie them together?
Yeah, so the plan is to try and get all of the stores that are unionized on the same page. We have like the National Bargaining Committee, the National Concerted Activity Team, trying to get everybody synchronized.
Right, because you're up to about 200 election wins at this point, something like that, right?
Yeah, 220.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's even it grows more and more every day. I'm struggling to keep up with it, and that's impressive. It's something that I'm assuming is going to continue down the road, which is why Starbucks is asking for kind of a freeze, aren't they?
Yeah, they're asking. Well, they're saying that the NLRB is rigging the elections, which it's crazy to me.
How so?
Yeah, I don't know.
By allowing people to vote and doing it in a timely manner. Oh no, you've got to put your thumb on the scale.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, I feel like Starbucks is the one that's like messing with elections because they are hiring in anti-union people to be on these ballots. They're having partners challenge ballots whenever they do have the elections. They're just doing all these things. Of course, they're firing partners before they can even vote. But it's crazy. Starbucks is the one that's messing with elections, if anything.
Yeah, and the courage that the workers have shown is just incredible. And in this moment, I'm incredibly optimistic that labor and organizing is going to continue to grow. And we're in a moment, I think, where the labor movement across the board needs to grow. I mean, we've seen 40 years of stagnant wages. We've seen, a decline in the standard of living. This is the way we rebuild that.
Yeah, like every day I see that there's a new union, like Chipotle is unionizing, Trader Joe's is unionizing, and I feel like because of Starbucks and Amazon doing their thing, taking on these big corporations, it's empowering people to do the same.
So I guess the last line of questioning I have for you, as a consumer, as a citizen, how can we help I'm a boycott guy. If Howard Schultz and Starbucks is treating their people poorly, I'm just not going there. Is that the push? Is there something else? I've also got friends who go, no, you've got to go to Starbucks and you have them write union on the cup or solidarity or something. What's the marching order for listeners who go to Starbucks, who drink coffee, who want to help you? What's the ask?
I mean, if you're not already going to Starbucks, I would encourage you not to. But if you are a Starbucks drinker, you can always support by, having the Union Strong or Solidarity Forever on your cup. And just, giving the workers words of encouragement. If you know a store in your area that's unionizing or is unionized, I would say go to that store. Like, if you're going to go to any Starbucks, go to one that's unionized or organizing.
Is there a way for us to find that? Is there a website to say, hey, this is the unionized store, this is not? Is there, like they do with hotels, is there something along that line?
I can't remember right off the bat what the website is called, but if you Google Starbucks Union Store Tracker, there's a website that has like a map of all the stores that are either they have an election coming or they've won their union, so you can find out where the unionized stores are near you.
Excellent stuff. Billy, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Great stuff. Keep up the great work. I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts again real soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. I'm going to take a quick break here from Netroots Nation. Back after this.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back here to Netroots Nation. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. One of the things I love about coming to these conferences, you never know who you're going to run into in the hall, and that's why I'm thrilled to sit down with Hamilton Nolan. He's a labor reporter over at In These Times. Does some fantastic reporting, and always somebody I love having on the program. Hamilton, thanks for sitting down with us.
Thanks, man. Good to see you in your home state, even.
It was good to see you. I was actually kind of surprised to see you here.
I'm here moderating a panel with some progressive organizers tomorrow, so I'm here courtesy of the News Guild.
Nice.
Shout out to the News Guild. Yeah.
Shout out to the News Guild. Now, front and center, a lot of the Starbucks workers marching around, a lot of the Amazon labor union people. Labor seems to be the new black.
Well, we'll see. I hope so, man. I mean, it definitely is in the streets, and whether I guess I'm writing a book this year, which is kind of on this very question, which is sort of like labor is very hot at the grassroots level right now, but can we actually translate that into a powerful, functional, stable, long-term labor movement, which I think is still a bit of an open question.
Yeah, because a lot of people have been looking at the Amazon labor union's victory at JFK 8 and going, we could replicate this everywhere. And I'm like, well, I hope we can, because you're then talking about societal change. You're talking about more people being involved in grassroots kind of organizing, kind of being, instead of this concept of the union as a kind of a business entity, you're internalizing union as part of your existence. That to me is the positive way to go.
Yeah, and ALU is such a great example of what's happening because, you know, as you know, they were an independent union. The independents were the first ones to actually win an election at Amazon. And now we have all this, or they have all this incoming interest. You know, they'll say we have incoming questions from Amazon warehouses all over the country. But what they don't have is, like, the resources to organize all those Amazon warehouses. You know, they just filed for an election in Albany, which is great. And, you know, we all hope that goes well. But it's such a good example of, like, a place and an institution and a group of workers that's harnessing all that grassroots energy. And the institutions in the labor movement and the big unions and the ones that do have the resources and the money need to pitch in and help ALU, you know, be able to build the bandwidth to actually respond to all that interest from workers, because that interest doesn't last forever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But can you do what they did, what Chris Smalls and the crew did there at JFK 8 all across the country? Can you replicate that?
I mean, look, I believe you can. I'm an optimist for the labor movement. I mean, I always believe that people will organize. If people understand what unions are about and what they do, they will naturally be in favor of unions, because unions are good for workers. So, I mean, it's all a matter of cutting through the bullshit and the lies. And but, you know, the energy is there today. So it's like the positive sort of feeling of a lot of regular people towards unions is in the air right now, and we have to strike while the iron is hot and take advantage of that. And so, again, it's like this sort of atmosphere that we're in right now, that when everybody's talking about Starbucks and Amazon everywhere you go, it doesn't last forever. You know, it feels, when you're in it, you're like, hey, this is the new normal, but obviously it's not. You know, you've been around a long time, and you know these things, like, go up and down. So the places that have the resources to build institutions got to build on these independent efforts that are happening, like ALU. And, you know, some unions are. I mean, I know the teachers gave them a bunch of money to get an office and stuff like that. So all that stuff is great, but, like, we got to all kind of lay our egos aside and our territorialism aside, and our everybody wanting to be the ones, you know, to grab all these workers and say, look, man, we all got to go where the energy is and help out. You know?
No, you're right. And because Amazon right now is the target, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, and, you know, look, they won an election in Staten Island, but when you think about what it's going to take to get a contract, that's going to be a bit, you know, Amazon is going to drag that to the Supreme Court and back as many times as they can. So, you know, that's another place. Like, we need all that firepower of labor politically, you know, in D.C. I mean, this is ultimately going to be a political question, like, to force these companies to the table. Same thing as Starbucks and Chipotle, and you see a lot of places closing stores now. Starbucks closing stores left and right, firing organizers. Chipotle closed the first store that they had that unionized in Maine. These are kind of like companies not feeling that they're going to have any penalties. I mean, all these companies are not stupid. They're making the political calculation that they're not going to be held responsible politically, they're not going to be held responsible by regulators, and they're not going to be held responsible by consumers or workers. So we have to prove them wrong.
No, and that's what I've been saying for a while. It's great to win an election every now and then. You got to get the contract.
Yeah.
And until there's an entity that's going to either force that to happen or public pressure to force that to happen, I don't ever see Amazon coming around unless there's the pressure, and that comes from us, and that comes from workers across the spectrum organizing or understanding the importance.
Yeah, you know, and look, I mean, and you look at a place like Starbucks, you know, Starbucks, those workers are doing everything that you would say that they should do, which is when Starbucks is not coming to the table, they're striking. They're striking at Starbucks stores all over the country, and they have been for months and months, you know, and that's like what you would say the workers should be doing, but it takes more, you know. It does take, ultimately, our alleged friends in politics have to come and lean on these companies, lean on Howard Schultz, and especially on Amazon, which is the real, behemoth. You're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar company. Yeah, I mean, and of course, we can't expect that regulators in D.C. are going to be as labor-friendly as they are now. So if they're not getting it done now, it's only going to get worse.
No, you're absolutely right. And this is where the argument that the NLRB is too friendly to workers, so we need to slow the process down, seems to be an interesting argument made by these companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw. This was related to antitrust, but Amazon filed a lawsuit saying that they were being harassed by the FTC. Bezos was being harassed by the FTC. So I mean, these corporations genuinely don't believe that they should be regulated because they haven't been regulated essentially since the Reagan era. And so, again, like from the perspective of the labor movement, we really, really, really got to strike while the iron is hot. And like, we got a friend at the NLRB. We got a friend in the White House, at least to by the standards of U.S. presidents, and we got to get something out of that. We got to get some tangible progress out of that. We got to get contracts sealed. We got to get union campaigns won while we have the good conditions, because when it gets worse, it only gets harder.
Yeah, ultimately, at the end of this, for all this energy and all this activity, you got to make people's lives better.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the promise of the labor movement. I mean, that's what we tell people when we organize. You are going to take a risk, and you're going to risk your job possibly and your livelihood, but you're doing it, ultimately to make your life better and your coworkers' life better. So it's very true. If you win a big election in an Amazon warehouse and you got thousands of people to go out on a limb and vote for that, and then you can't pull a contract in a year, 2 years, 3 years. I mean, how many years are going to go by before they're able to get a contract at an Amazon warehouse? So, yeah, we got to throw everything into that, because it really does. It goes stale. It goes stale, and people start getting cynical, and there starts to be a backlash, and all that stuff is kind of poisons the well for organizing.
Yeah, if only we could have that backlash against Amazon.
I know. Well, it's
they treat their workers terribly.
Yeah.
I mean, the injury rates are higher than the industry standards. They talk about, we pay, this high wage, but the reality is in the warehouse industry, they're on the lower end.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the reality is they're the bad actor.
Yeah, and man, I've been saying for months, man, Democrats should be running against a guy like Jeff Bezos and against a guy like Howard Schultz. I mean, they should be putting their picture on billboards. They should be having them in TV ads being like, these are the villains,
Yeah, but how do you do that when Howard Schultz was almost was going to possibly be Hillary Clinton's labor secretary?
Yeah, well, look, it's a new
Think
day.
about that
I mean,
world.
I know, and not for nothing, but I would love the next reporter that interviews Hillary. I would really love them to ask her about that, because I don't know that she's ever responded to that directly, even though that comes up every time Howard Schultz does something terrible. So, whoever's out there that has access to Hillary, please ask her about that.
But isn't this the problem with Democrats as a whole? I mean, they're trying to be the party of working people, but while dabbling their toes into, we still need to pander to corporate America.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you think back to the Clinton era in the 90s,
do I have to?
The Democratic Party as an institution was much more neoliberal at that time than it is today. So,
sure.
I mean, institutionally, there has been some progress. Democrats are always going to disappoint us and always going to piss us off, and it's like moving an aircraft carrier. So you're always going to be trying to pull that party to the left. But, I mean, even when you think of pure political opportunities, think of Bezos. Who likes Bezos? Even Republicans hate Bezos. Republicans hate Bezos. Like, take advantage of this. Like, everybody hates this guy. This guy is a villain. He's a legitimate villain. He deserves to be a villain. And instead of worrying about why working people are running off and voting for Trump and saying we're going to lose this right-wing populism, let's have a genuine form of populism. Let's have a genuine worker-centric form of populism and say, like, these are the villains, and we're going to be the party that stands against that.
There you go. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Hamilton Nolan. He's a labor reporter over in these times. Also an author. You got a book coming out soon, maybe? We expecting that?
Probably early 2024, because the publishing industry is very slow, but I'm working on it now, and it's all about sort of everything that we're talking about right now. Organized labor, there's a lot of reporting in it about various aspects of interesting unions, exciting campaigns across America, and reformers within the labor movement, and so please put it on your birthday list.
There you go, because there's a lot going on. I just don't know that it gets reported on enough. I know you do a great job, and there are some other folks who do incredible work, but it's just not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, between the two of us, we probably know every labor reporter in America, which is actually a bad thing. There's just not that many. There's not that much of a labor press, which is too bad when you think about how important it is of an issue structurally. So there really are some great labor reporters out there, but not enough.
A lot of work to do. But Hamilton, I appreciate the work you guys do. Fantastic stuff. I look forward to the book. Good stuff.
Good. Thanks for having me, man. Good to see you.
Anytime. Good to see you as well, our good friend Hamilton Nolan. Going to take a quick break back here from Netroots Nation here in Pittsburgh. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day striking Teamsters in Minneapolis defied martial law. They stopped scab trucks, forcing the release of their strike leaders. Armed with bayonets and machine guns, the National Guard had patrolled the streets for nearly a week. They seized scores of strikers and union leaders and threw them into military stockades. Drivers were outraged. They defied Governor Olson and Major General Walsh, who, on behalf of the Citizens Alliance and trucking bosses, were determined to break the strike. Soon after strikers were imprisoned, drivers began chasing scab trucks across the city. Multiple reports poured in of picketers forcing trucks to stop. Some unloaded their cargo onto bridges. Others chased, captured, and damaged the scab trucks. Strikers ripped ignition wires out, forced scabs from the wheel, and then disappeared before police and the National Guard could arrive to retaliate. In just 3 hours, strikers had overturned nearly 70 trucks. Unable to stop the superior force of striking drivers, Bill Brown, Vincent, and Miles Dunn were ordered unconditionally released from the military stockades. Now, employers, the governor, and other strike-breaking agencies were eager to propose peace to federal mediators. But they proposed to scrap the terms of their earlier May agreement. In response, the leaders of Local 574 issued a general strike call. In it, they asked, quote, "Is there one man so blind as not to see that if 574 is allowed to go down to defeat under the brutal hammering of military despotism, the whole labor movement of the city will have been dealt a mortal blow? Union men, brothers, sisters, fellow workers, what are you going to do about it? We appeal to you for solidarity." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
The old home place is a classic theme of Americana, expressed in everything from Norman Rockwell paintings to Woody Guthrie's powerful folk lament, "Ain't Got No Home in This World Anymore." But for a heart-rending modern-day version of the emotional pull of home, you can't beat the poignant wail of a new song entitled "The Low-Down Down Home Atherton Rich Man Blues." Warning, you might need a box of tissues to get through this sad saga. Atherton, California, is a small town of some 7,500 souls who face a dreadful housing crisis. Unlike most situations, though, they are alarmed by a looming threat of too much housing. It seems that a recent California law requires cities to provide some affordable multifamily housing to help cope with a growing statewide shortage of homes, meaning Atherton needs to put in about 350 townhouse units as its share. Townhouses shriek the locals. This can't be. Unrich people live in townhouses. You see, Atherton is a precious enclave in the heart of the Silicon Valley, where only tech billionaires are allowed. The price of their mansions averages $8 million, with each one secluded on at least an acre of land. So, townhouse people? No way! As one affordable housing advocate put it, Atherton talks about multifamily housing as if it were a Martian invasion. In a letter to the city council, the multi-billionaire Andreessen family wailed that allowing more than one residence per acre, quote, "will massively decrease our home values and quality of life." I'm sure you weep for them, so grab a tissue. Yet some Athertonians are at least trying to find solutions. One suggests that all of the residents' swimming pool cabanas should count toward the town's affordable housing requirements. This is Jim Hightower saying, if that won't make you cry, nothing will.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here we are in the final day of Netroots Nation, and a little bit more of a subdued after a couple of nights of activities. Let's put it that way. Folks, the faithful are coming in for the final day of panels and of organizing and networking. And I'm glad to sit here with Adam Green. He's the co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. You want to check out the work that they do, boldprogressives.org. Adam, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be here with you, Rick.
So I see you're wide-eyed, bushy-tailed. Not a rough night for you?
You know, I decided to skip the after party and get a few hours sleep, so I'm doing okay. But that's been fun.
So as this wraps up, and this has been a really great couple of days of networking and of organizing opportunities, where does it go from here?
Yeah, it's really been a family reunion of sorts. People who collaborate together who haven't seen each other for a long time, and so much work actually happens in the hallways, right? 1 5-minute conversation can blossom into a whole campaign plan.
Yep.
So what happens from here? We got to save democracy and save the working class, and I'm excited to talk to you about it.
It's just little things like saving democracy.
minor details.
So how do we do that? I look at the state that I live in here in Pennsylvania. We've got a guy running for governor who's the antithesis of democracy, Benito Mastriano, yeah. and the fear is that our state is moving towards the crazy. And we end up with someone like Mastriano.
Yeah, there's some basics. I was talking to someone the other day just saying, it's really important that you vote. And they were like, yeah, 2024. And I was like,
no.
Oh, wait, and they're in Florida, another swing state. And I was like, wait, there's an election this year, right?
There's an election every year.
Yeah, sure.
And this is the thing that drives me crazy, and I'm glad you brought that up. People think elections are presidential. I'm going, no, the important ones are all the other ones.
Yeah.
Presidential is somewhat important to a degree to me. The president kind of has some influence, but it's my local dog catchers, my local county commissioner. It's who runs our states. That's where the real power is. That's what really affects my life.
That's absolutely true, and it lays the groundwork for the presidential, right? I mean,
right.
So many voter turnout was down in 2010, and that's when the gerrymandering happened and led to where we are right now with the state legislatures and the policy happening in the states and Congress. And right now there's a very dangerous opinion that might be issued by the Supreme Court next year that says that the entirety of election planning in any state, including Pennsylvania, I think Pennsylvania is actually number 1 on the list, is just dictated by the legislature. The Supreme Court of the state can't even weigh in. The governor can't weigh in. It's called the independent state legislature doctrine. And that's very scary in a world where gerrymandering has made these right-wing legislatures, right? They can basically say after the election, we think there was some voter fraud, so we're going to send some other electors. And it would be legal if the Supreme Court rules next year. So we have to pay attention to state ledge. We're very invested in Secretary of State races in some places like Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada. Pennsylvania, the Secretary of State that counts the votes is appointed by the governor. So it's actually a double bang for the buck here. Everybody should be chipping into Josh Shapiro and making sure that he wins. And don't take for granted that if you know Pennsylvania that they know there's an election. So let's start with the basics. Anybody across the coffee table can start by just educating people. There is an election this year.
There you go.
And then there's a ladder of engagement, donating, volunteering, and prioritizing some races.
This may be weird, but I give Donald Trump credit for exposing that kind of direction that Republicans were heading, moving elections away from we the people and the popular vote and back to the legislatures, back towards the powered elite that they obviously control because of gerrymandering. I give him credit for exposing that. Now, it's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to steal an election, but that's been in the works for a while, I think.
Yeah. There's this pattern of things happening right in front of our face, right? Like we got the Dobbs decision 2 months early. I'm not sure that we properly prepared for it, but we knew it was coming. And here he's pretty much telling us, I'm going to steal democracy if I win again, and I'm trying to endorse people who will steal the election next time. There was a CNN article this past week that the headline was, 10 election deniers are the Republican nominee for Secretary of State.
Yep.
That's super scary. It's not one person, one outlier. It's a strategy. They're moving pieces on the chessboard, and that's why we're asking people to chip into Secretary of State races, volunteer, remember to vote, and vote down ballot. And we can all make a difference.
Absolutely. And this is where you go, when they tell you who you are, who they are, believe them.
Believe them.
Is it that difficult? And look, I've been screaming about this stuff for years, of how they're rigging the elections and how they're, even before a ballot is cast, but yet it was all about stopping the steal and Joe Biden in his basement learning coding or whatever Q schemes they were dreaming up. It's crazy how the right-wing messaging machine has been able to kind of brainwash a generation into believing things that aren't true.
It is a parallel universe. In the early days of the Trump administration, I did a lot of Fox News, and I was trying to just get a message out to people, and I was shocked at the alternative universe that I was living in as I got asked these questions. It had nothing to do with reality.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, surely the other guests on this panel will object to this framing. It's like, no, I was like a loner, like trying to insist that certain things that were true. And that's what people are seeing. It's not that they are necessarily, I think there are some hardcore right-wing ideologues who are part of the misinformation campaign. And then there's just millions and millions of people who tune into Fox and the various Ben Shapiro derivatives of Fox. And that's all they get, right? That's all they're being told. And that's why it's actually so important that folks like you exist. And I think we need a more independent media ecosystem.
No, it's the reason we started this program 17 years ago.
Seriously.
Look, I'm driving a truck. I moved into a new area. My truck driver buddies are spewing Limbaugh and Hannity and, saying, hey, we'd make more money if there was no union here and things would be better if the union didn't exist. Yeah. And I'm going, wait, where in society is that happening?
Yeah.
And I decided, we've got to balance the airwaves a little bit. And it's been an uphill climb ever since.
Yeah, and it will continue to be for a while, but we have to start making some movements. Now, I want to make sure that we talk about how we rebuild a working class in America, and make sure that Democrats understand that that people understand that Democrats are the party of the working class. But someone posed to me the question recently: why is it that we have such a good agenda, but when voters are asked who do you trust more on the economy, it's 50-50, or sometimes Democrats lose? I thought that was a really interesting question. I don't know if you have any profound thoughts on the answer to that question. I'll start with that, actually.
I'm trying to figure out how the tables turned, and you're interviewing me now.
Okay.
No, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that, you've got a right-wing media culture that's used to feeding people misinformation. Yeah. And while we've been fed, all of the DLC corporate, Democrat stuff, which I've been opposed to, all the neoliberalism, all the, the deregulation that came out of the Clinton era, that's what people think of when they think of Democrats now.
I think it's right. I'm also constantly reminded that everyday people don't necessarily watch the national news or imbibe the national media the way that we do. I'm not sure they know what was in the Build Back Better plan. And
they don't.
Right.
Because we spent time talking about numbers. It was like 6.2 trillion. It was 3.5 trillion and 1.522.
And that's even if they're watching it all.
Right.
My co-founder Stephanie, who I think you interviewed, she recently talked to somebody who, in central Pennsylvania, is not very political, but probably votes Republican, did vote for Trump. And when she started asking him, like, do you support raising the minimum wage? He was like, oh, of course. Do you support this pro-labor policy? Oh, of course. Do you support choice? I do. And then he actually asked an amazing question. He goes, why did Joe Biden let them get rid of choice? Which, to me, was like, oh, my God. Like, it's not that he's a rigid right-wing ideologue. It's that the information, people just think, oh, president, something bad happened, and that's why the inflation attack is so, right? People aren't necessarily tuning into the news. He gets his news off Facebook. So the more I think about it, the more I actually come back to something you said before, which is local matters. Fighting local fights matters. When Bernie stands on the picket line with local Amazon workers, that sends a signal to people in that area who either work at that location or who know people who work there that, oh, the Democrats are the ones who show up for workers, right?
Oh, no. You hit something that has been one of those sore spots in my side for so long.
Yeah.
I met President Obama a couple of times, shook his hand twice. Mm-hmm. He told me we were going to get something better than the Employee Free Choice Act. We didn't get anything.
Got nothing.
He said he was going to put on comfortable shoes and walk the picket line. And while I was sleeping on the granite floor in the Capitol in Wisconsin.
Yep.
He was nowhere to be found and didn't mention a word about it.
Yeah.
That's the reason people don't see Democrats as the party of the working class. When there's a street fight to be had, they're going to offer to hold your coat. They're not going to ball up their digits and get in there and take a punch, even if they lose. And that's why I think a lot of the white working class, and we'll split the working class, the white working class sees the Republicans as fighters. Even if they're fighting the wrong battles and even if they're fighting things that are in the complete antithesis of their interests, they're still fighters.
Yep.
And while I don't agree with it, I understand it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And you mentioned when there's a fight to be had, that's actually two things. You can join a fight that's happening, which Obama could have done in that situation, and you can pick a fight.
Right.
I think Democrats just need to pick more fights, and the more I think about it, the more local fights. And I'll tell you just one more story. I spent one of the best years of my life in South Dakota on a Democratic Senate campaign. Before I was actually even a self-identified progressive. I was just a Democratic press hack. And this bill came up that year that the senator I was working for offered a big provision of, which would basically protect little guy family farmers from being taken over by big ag monopolies, right?
And who could be against that?
Who could be against that? Well, a lot of corporate interests were against that, and they flooded the state with money, and there was a question of, would we reverse position to, cater to these big money attack ads and try to make them stop? And the senator was like, this is my position. I'm going to fight for it. And my job was to pull together a press conference at the Sioux Falls Public Library, and these farmers and ranchers drove from up to 4 hours away to be there. And this one guy gets up to the podium who was not scheduled to speak, which is your worst nightmare if you're a press secretary, having your first event with your new boss. But he gets up and he says something I'll never forget. He goes, "Look around this room. Look at all these cowboy hats. Pretty much every one of us is a Republican. And we're standing with Democratic Senator Tim Johnson because he's fighting for economic interests. He's fighting to protect our family farms." And you could hear a pin drop. And because it was such a live fight that year, every other press conference we did was about ag issues. And I spent hours on the phone with these people who were evangelical, anti-choice, pro-gun, church-going, lifelong Republicans who were willing to cross party lines when the fight was on, and the Democrat was clearly saying, "I will protect you from these big corporations."
Yep.
And we won that year by 524 votes in a year that Democrats got wiped out across the nation in a 20-point red state. And it's always stuck with me because that stands for the proposition that we're talking about, which is we can connect with working people when the fight is on, if we pick a fight, and if we are squarely on the side of working people. And we just got to do that more.
Absolutely. It's what I've been saying for 17 years now.
Well, you've been right.
Because I want somebody who's going to stand up and fight for those issues that help a kid like me growing up in the projects in Cleveland get to where I am now, living in a neighborhood with doctors and lawyers. And I want that kid growing up in that same project to have the same opportunities.
Amen.
It's that simple. But, Adam, I appreciate the time. Keep up the great work. I hope folks will check out the website, boldprogressives.org. Adam Green is the co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. Check that website out. Adam, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for all you're doing, Rick.
Good
Take
stuff.
Care.
Going to take a quick break back here from Netroots Nation. Make sure you check out that website. Netrootsnation.org is the website. Going to take a quick break. Back after this.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back here to Pittsburgh at Netroots Nation. Make sure you check out the work they're doing, netrootsnation.org, the website. Voting. Yes, voting seems to be one of the common themes here at the Netroots Nation conference, getting people out to vote. How are we going to get the young people out to vote? Because they seem to be the ones everyone's relying on to save democracy, to save the nation from, well, doom and gloom. And here to share some thoughts on how we do just that, I've asked Santiago Meyer to come sit down with us. He's the executive director of Voters of Tomorrow, votersoftomorrow.org, the website. Santiago, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So that's the big question. How do we make sure your generation gets to the polls?
Well, Gen Z is as energized as ever. We have seen in the far right wage a war against Gen Z, and we are ready to really go back and tell them that we're not the right generation to be messed with. So the way to get us out to vote is really just by talking to our generation, showing them what fighting for us really looks like, and talking to us in a way that we can understand, not just being condescending, not just calling us naive because we think that big things can happen, but actually going in and talking about our priorities, talking about climate change, talking about gun violence, talking about how we will protect abortion rights across the country, because that is something that young people deeply care about. And we need to make sure that we're talking to young people in places where they are. We're talking to them in ways they understand. And that is why organizations like Voters of Tomorrow are doing the work, because we are Gen Z. We know how we like to talk because we talk ourselves that way. And we really need to be investing in more organizations like VOT to make sure that young people can lead the charge to get young people to the polls.
Now, I look at your generation. Every generation has trials and tribulations. They've got things they go through. But I'm looking at the last 20 years, and this has been a pretty difficult 20 years of crisis, of economic collapse, of pandemic, of all kinds of things. Your generation has seen some stuff already.
Yeah, I mean, my friend John DeLavolpe, he leads the Institute of Polling at Harvard, and he recently wrote a book about Gen Z and politics. And the argument that he makes is that every generation goes through crises.
Sure.
But that the big difference with Generation C is that while other generations generally have a come-together moment at the end of it, Gen Z has not had that. We have had, we were born with 9/11. We grew up during the financial crisis. We graduated during a pandemic into another financial crisis. We have grown up with gun shooter drills. The world is burning with climate change. And we have not had a moon landing. We had not had a fall of the wall of Berlin moment where everyone can come together and really appreciate humanity. So we have seen the worst of the world, but we've never truly seen the good parts of it. And that has really just forced Gen Z to try to fix all of this, because we understand the damage that it's done to us, and we don't want it to happen to the next generation.
Yeah, see, I look at some of the videos on Instagram and on TikTok and other places where your generation is viewed as the weak generation. I've hurt myself. That kind of. I'm sure you've seen them. Is that fair?
I don't think it's fair at all. I mean, I think the fact that we are able to talk about what we feel makes us strong, because it's something that could have solved so many issues in the past. I mean, when people talk about what they're feeling, it doesn't make them weak. It actually makes it so that you can have a conversation about what is going on and how to make sure people aren't hurt. And especially with everything going on, when we've had crisis after crisis after crisis, when many of us got involved because of mass shootings, when the ocean is catching on fire because of climate change, it is incredibly important to understand how people feel. Because if we're not doing that, we don't know what people are going through, and people are going through a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to my formative years, and trying to find that 20-year period where you grew up through. And I remember Iran-Contra. I remember mutually assured destruction. Diving under desks for drills, because evidently school desks were the way that nuclear winter was avoided.
Absolutely, your desk would protect you from nuclear fallout.
But we all knew that was a joke. But you throw that school shooting thing in there. That's something that's really possible and frightening. And I can't imagine what it's like to go through that. And I fear for my kids.
No, I mean, you have now an entire generation of students who literally jump when they hear a balloon pop, because you never know if it's just a balloon popping or whether you're about to be the next victim of a mass shooting.
Yeah.
And that is horrible. It has left an entire generation absolutely scarred and damaged and living afraid for their lives. And that really does something to people. I mean, you can't expect people to be healthy when they're always living alarmed and always ready to jump under a table.
Yeah. You listen to the Rick Smith Show with Santiago Meyer, Executive Director of Voters of Tomorrow. VotersOfTomorrow.org, the website, if you want to check out the work that they do and get involved. Now, the big question is, the million-dollar question is, your generation is, being touted as the most political generation. You're going to vote. Will the numbers bear that out? Will you be able to get, and I know that's your goal, going to get them out?
Yes. I mean, yes. We are aiming to exceed 2018 turnout and to break midterm records with the highest youth voting turnout. And we are quite confident we're going to reach that goal because, again, Gen Z is under attack. The far right is coming for us, and we're going to show them that they pissed off the wrong generation. So we are not going to back down. We're not going to stay home. We're going to turn out and vote and make sure that they are voted out in such a manner that they can never hold political office again.
Well, that is the hope. But, again, history has shown us that the young vote sometimes doesn't. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of talk. I always want them to show up. Miss that day.
Listen, we've overcome history in 2018. We've overcome history in 2020, and we're going to overcome history in 2022.
Please do, and especially here in Pennsylvania, because there's a crazy guy running for governor.
Doug Mastriano has no clue what's waiting for him when Gen Z turns out in November.
So what's the message to your fellow Gen Zers? What's that? What do you tell my kids?
I mean, it's really a simple message. The far right is scared of you because they understand that if you vote and you start using the power that you have, that they will never be politically viable again. That's why they're coming for all of us. That's why they're coming for books. That's why they're coming for our rights, because they want you to be afraid. They want you to be discouraged, and they also want you to be uneducated. There is this narrative that the far right is coming for teachers, and now that is also being encouraged by the teacher shortage. But the teachers are not the ultimate goal in their quest. Teachers are just in the way. They're coming for teachers because teachers are the bulletproof vest protecting students for what the far right actually wants to accomplish, which is to absolutely brainwash Generation C and now Generation Alpha. So my message to Gen Z is use that power. You have the numbers, you have the strength, use the power to punish the far right for everything that they're doing and hold them accountable for coming for your rights, for coming for your books, for coming for your right to control your own body. And once we do that, we are able to create the future that we truly want.
There you go. Santiago, I appreciate you taking time for us. I hope you're right. I want people to come out and vote, especially young people, because, look, I'm looking at you guys as the next greatest generation to save us, save our democracy, save the planet. A lot on your shoulders.
We appreciate your support. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Thanks so much, Santiago Meyer, Executive Director of Voters of Tomorrow. Quick break back here from Netroots Nation. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So as we wrap up our time here in Pittsburgh, and look, the crew had a fantastic time here. Beautiful place to visit. Loved being in the Market Square area. Lots of nice restaurants and opportunities to meet and network and talk to folks, especially the good folks here on Radio Row who have been so fantastic to help us out with our needs and get the program out and all that. And our friends over at Free Speech TV. If you don't check out the Free Speech TV show, by all means do. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. and every Saturday at 7 p.m. And they rebroadcast stuff all throughout the week. Easy stuff to find. And look, we seem to be in a lot of places. Easy to find. You can find that at thericksmithshow.com. So again, as we wrap up here, a lot of the labor voice part of it, really interesting moment. The fact that you're seeing this kind of coordination and people coming together. My problem with the Democratic Party and with the left and with the liberals and whatever you want to put left of center is always how divided they are, how silo thinking they are, and how easily they are to pit against each other. And it's conferences like this one that help bridge those gaps, that help people start to understand each other and where they can work together and how they can work together, and in which arenas to do that. And that's why this stuff is so important. And there needs to be more of these on the left. There needs to be more of this kind of coming together of the minds to share best practices and to share ideas and to do all of those things that the right has been doing for decades. They have been doing this stuff for, mobilizing activists, educating supporters, and then, really, using the human capital, the brain capital, to move us in a positive forward direction. For me, that's the exciting part of this. Now, the question is, what happens out of this? Every time I come to one of these conferences, every time I come to one of these get-togethers, I go, okay, this is great. We had a good weekend. We had people who came together. We shared stories, we shared ideas. We laughed. Some people cried. There was all of that. What tomorrow? What the next day? What's going to come out of this lasting? What's going to move the needle forward? And I'm guardedly optimistic, given the moment that we're in. Given the post-Roe stuff, given the fact that there's this resurgence of labor organizing, great opportunities. The question is will we take advantage of it? That's simple. But I appreciate the positive comments of our time here at Netroots. I hope folks enjoyed the coverage of it. We will be back in the studio live tomorrow, and taking your thoughts and all of that. But I've enjoyed our time here. Hope you have too. If you missed any of our coverage here of Netroots Nation, by all means, check out the podcasts. You can do that by going to thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. From iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. Where you find yours, you'll find ours. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
The bill I'm about to sign is not just about today, it's about tomorrow. It's about delivering progress and prosperity to American families.
Inflation Reduction Act's landmark climate action is now the law of the land, as
the worst drought in 1,200 years, as water managers in 7 states, 30 tribal nations, and Mexico fighting over every precious drop.
Western states hit with unprecedented water cuts, and
science and the data leads us to now understand that we will lose 10% of our water supply by 2040.
California proposes big changes amid historic drought.
All of that history and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment. Today, courtesy of climate and energy journalist David Roberts, who tweeted recently, quote, "Every few minutes I repeat to myself in a quiet voice, it's okay. Joe Manchin can't hurt you anymore." No, he can't, David. It's okay. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, very big news. We've been talking about it for weeks, months, actually years, but
yes.
The U.S. has finally passed and signed a major climate bill.
Yes, President Biden signed the Democrats' landmark climate, healthcare, and tax reform bill into law on Tuesday, with the largest single investment in climate action in U.S. history. $370 billion in investments to speed up the transition to clean energy and tackle climate change.
Now, we should note $370 billion is a lot of money, but it is spread over 10 years, and really, we need to do a lot more.
Oh, yes, it is most definitely not enough. In remarks at the signing, Biden drew a sharp contrast between Democrats and Republicans.
And remember, every single Republican, every single one, voted against tackling the climate crisis, against lowering our energy costs, against creating good-paying jobs.
Not only did every Republican vote no, but on the House floor, several Republicans called climate science a hoax, even as Americans are suffering amid one of the hottest summers in U.S. history. Last month set a new record for the hottest overnight temperatures on average, which are linked to an increase in heat deaths. And a new survey finds nearly 40% of U.S. farmers are plowing under their own crops and selling off cattle because of extreme drought. The bill also contains $5 billion in new funding for drought mitigation in southwestern states. Federal water managers this week announced a new round of mandatory water cuts for the 7 states that rely on the Colorado River because water levels are plummeting due to the historic mega drought in the U.S. West. The urgent action protects 2 major dams from structural damage after states failed to reach an agreement among themselves. Starting in January, Arizona will lose 1/5 of its river allocation. Nevada, 8%. Mexico, 7%. California won't see cuts until the next phase of the drought response. The feds will implement other actions to shore up supplies in the new system while a new agreement is negotiated.
So this agreement has been in place for years, but this is the first time it's actually had to be triggered?
Yes. Arizona and Nevada water agencies are not happy about the cuts, and they are demanding that other states, California, do more to preserve the river.
Hey, it's our water. We got there first.
Speaking of falling water levels, a fifth set of human remains has been found in the rapidly declining Lake Mead Reservoir near Las Vegas.
A fifth set of remains?
Yes, even while Vegas is experiencing its wettest monsoon season in years that is flooding streets and casinos.
So that ought to fill up Lake Mead a little bit, no?
Not even close.
Oh.
In California, Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom has proposed sweeping new measures to increase the state's water supply amid the mega drought.
We're going to steal more water from the Colorado?
The $8 billion plan calls for upgrading the state's entire water system to increase efficiency with new infrastructure for water storage and stormwater capture, groundwater management, increased recycling and reuse, and desalination plants.
There's plenty of water that flows through that just flows right out, that we can reuse, that is high quality, safe, and affordable. And so it's, again, about just being a little bit more resourceful and provide us more capacity to balance the needs as an ag state so that we're not going at each other, urban versus ag.
I don't know. Dick Cheney said you can't conserve your way out of a crisis.
Finally, some great news. In Massachusetts, Republican Governor Charlie Baker signed a sweeping climate and energy bill into law with major provisions to boost offshore wind energy, decarbonize Boston's transit system, allow cities to ban fossil fuel appliances in new buildings, and require all new cars sold in Massachusetts to be zero emissions by 2035.
Well, that's that. I guess Charlie Baker is going to have to be thrown out of the Republican Party. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about as we come to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and wrapping up our coverage of the Netroots Nation Conference. One of the big events of the weekend, and I got to tell you, I've had a great time here in Pittsburgh talking about how we change the world one issue at a time. All the labor organizing, all of the labor voices, all of the people who are saying what I've been saying for years. If we're going to change the country, if we're going to change this country for the better, it's going to start in the workplace. It's going to be about organizing workers to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, voice on the job. If you want to change things, you change the economics, you change the workplace, and start moving away from where we're going. And we're going in a really ugly kind of place in this world of gig work, and you're your own risk factory, really. Now, I got a lot of responses from people in some of the conversations that we've had. Some pushback on the charter school stuff, and I'll be honest, the fact that the charter school folks are paying attention and not attacking me on the lines of, no, you're wrong, charter schools are so much better. No, you're wrong. Here's the proof of how well students do in the charter environment. That's not the argument, because it's not true. The argument is choice. It's choice. And it's other stuff. And that's the interesting part, especially here in Pittsburgh, where I look around and there are a lot of these charter schools that have sprung up. And in talking with some of the folks that work here in the facility, it is a big thing here that's really hurting the public schools. This is one of those things that when you talk to teachers, they're concerned about, because every one of them has a story, especially in my state of Pennsylvania, where you have kids who go to these cyber charters and then end up skipping an entire year because, oops, we didn't learn anything. Now you've got to remediate, and you've got to spend all this extra time. Slows everything. What we're doing, especially to poor kids, is criminal. And until we can have a real conversation about how we move in a direction that educates everyone, I've been advocating for one system that everyone is in, that everyone benefits from, and as I've said before, having the elites and the wealthy in the same district as the poor and downtrodden is only going to raise the bar. Rich community is going to say, hey, we want education that has music and art and gym, and we want librarians, and we want guidance counselors, and we want nurses, and we want things that, well, seem to the average person to be what is common in a school. Sadly, when you're talking about high poverty areas, because of the way we draw the lines, not so much common. So they get silver bullet quick fixes, where privatization and profitization seem to trump all. And so that's my little pushback to the attacks. Again, nobody brought up that the education is superior. Now, I remember when I went to Catholic school as a kid, the argument back then was, Catholic school was so much more superior than public school. And the argument was that, they were much more strict and parents were much more involved. And you could make that argument. The charter people aren't making that argument and haven't made that argument. They've made the choice argument. The divisive arguments of, well, like-minded people like us. And I don't think that's what we need in this moment, because look what it's gotten us. So there is that. But today on the program, I'm going to have some labor voices on the program. Again, for me, the big part of all of this conference is that underthread, that undercurrent of labor and talk of organizing and moving forward. So we got a lot to get to. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, AFT President Randy Weingarten going to be here to share some thoughts. Back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day that Joyce Miller became the first woman ever elected to the executive board of the AFL-CIO. In her 2012 obituary, the New York Times described Joyce's commitment to women's rights in the labor movement, writing, "Miss Miller saw union membership, collective bargaining, and labor contracts as the road to equality for working women. And she believed that women should be a part of union management to make sure that attention was paid to issues like equal opportunity, equal pay, parental leave, child care, health insurance, and discrimination in the workplace." Joyce grew up in Chicago, where she earned her master's degree in education from the University of Chicago. She first entered the labor movement as a worker at a gumball factory while attending college. After graduation, she became the education director for the Amalgamated Clothing Workers Union in Pittsburgh. She remained dedicated to union education for rank and file members. Joyce was a founding member of the Coalition of Labor Union Women, or CLU. She served as CLU's East Coast vice president, eventually being elected CLU's president in 1977, a position she would hold for 15 years. Under her leadership, CLU worked as a powerful voice for women's reproductive rights, improving child care, and increasing the number of women in union leadership positions. In 1993, President Bill Clinton named Joyce Miller the executive director of the Glass Ceiling Commission. The purpose of the commission was to gather testimony about women's experience in the workplace and to draft a report of their findings. Of her career, Joyce said, "I came to the labor movement with stars in my eyes. I saw it as a vehicle for social change, and I never changed my mind." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we wrap up our coverage here at Netroots Nation, netrootsnation.org, the website, thrilled to see our good friend Randy Weingarten here on the final day. Randy is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT. Randy, thanks for sitting down with us.
Of course.
So what brings you to Netroots Nation?
You know, it's the incredible activists. I was honored to, be asked to be part of it, and we need to also make sure that we can fund and this incredible group of progressive activists continue to get funded and continue to do the work that they do. And I'm glad to see Netroots Nation back in person in Pittsburgh, so I wanted to be here.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of great conferences. In fact, we were at your convention in Boston not too long ago.
Yep.
And this, bringing people back together and the networking and the opportunities that come out of that are so important in this moment.
And let me dwell on that for a second, because I think that that's really important in so many ways. It's complete bullshit when people say that, the unions didn't want people to be together, that the unions wanted people to be at home. We know the power of relationships and of community building and being together in person. And that's what creates trust, and that's what creates energy. So, the real key has been, how do you do this over the course of the pandemic? How do you make sure that you can be in person, in community with each other, and be safe?
Right.
That has always been the challenge. And what is remarkable about this summer, even as the variant, the Omicron variant has been, all over America, we have the treatment and the vaccine options now to keep people safe. So, whereas there may not be mandates right now, what we know is that there are tools right now to keep people safe. Masks, if you need it, vaccines, treatment options, and all of that is because of Joe Biden's administration, making sure that they could get it out to people. And I think that's why you see a huge difference this summer in all these in-person events of people coming back together.
No, it is important. I'm waiting for somebody to come out with the sticker. Joe Biden did that. Because we saw it, the gas pumps all over the place. Now that it's coming down, you don't see them slapping that stupid sticker all over the place.
Under $4 I saw today.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, teachers, you in particular, attacked for wanting to keep people safe. It's almost like the kid who failed biology is and science is the one leading the messaging on the right, because if I remember right, it was about keeping kids and teachers safe, not about destroying education and indoctrinating children and all the other craziness we hear on the right.
Well, I think what has happened in terms of the right wing is that they understand, because they live in the world of anger and fear and hate, they have a sixth sense for what will exacerbate anger and agita and fear and divide. That's the world they live in. I live in the world of how you create hope and aspiration and a future forward. So what they saw, I think, and when you saw it, there was a political article and a NBC article, I think back in February 2021, that said they were going to use this period of time to try to attack public schools as a means of dividing voters. So they, Rachel Maddow used to say this, believe them when they say it.
Yep.
They're arrogant enough to tell you what they're going to do. So they, they've always wanted to undermine public education and replace it with a privatized situation. Betsy DeVos has never been unclear about that. They now have taken this to the next step, which is divide, 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 make things worse, 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 create and keep people in their tribes, create and keep people in terms of grievance. So instead of being the party of hope and the party of problem solving, they are the party of division and hate and smear and fear. And that's what they did around COVID. So, you saw it in terms of last school year. All of a sudden you had this Delta virus emerge. And so the physicians, pediatricians said, oh my God, to keep everybody safe, we're going to wear masks. We're not the scientists. They are.
Right.
Okay, so we want to be in schools. They say you got to keep people wearing masks. So we're listening to the peds. They're telling us this. And then you see what the right wing did. Dividing parents, the mask police. The worst is, though, this whole push at chilling teachers from actually answering the questions of kids, from actually being kids' helpers. We're in Pittsburgh, Mr. Roger. We have to be kids' helpers. And so this attempt to ban books and censor curriculum, as opposed to if there are conflicts or issues or tough topics, where is it better to talk about them than in class, under the tutelage of a good teacher? So they're getting so bad, Rick, they're getting so extreme that now they're banning the Diary of Anne Frank and the Story of Ruby Bridges.
Yeah, but Mein Kampf is still in some
Right.
of the schools.
So, but think about, why would they ban the Diary of Anne Frank and the Story of Ruby Bridges? I mean, why? These are age-appropriate books for elementary school kids. Why would they ban them? Because they don't want kids to have empathy for other kids who faced oppression. A black kid who faced oppression, a Jewish kid who faced oppression. This is all about trying to destroy trust, trying to create distrust, trying to create fear and division. And what public schools are about is we're about trying to help people build relationships, build resilience, create trust, have a joy about going to schools. So we're trying to actually say, let's recover and thrive and bring everybody back in and create safe and welcoming environments where kids really have joy and where we go back to the basics. This is our campaign right now, what kids and communities need. The right wing is fight, 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 divide, 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 create fear. And if you can't do it based upon facts on the ground, then make things up. Like what DeSantis just did this week. One of the most horrific things, he gets on to one of his press conferences, looks right at the camera and says, pathological liar, excuse me, says, well, teachers, they're trying to change children's sexes. It is a pathological lie. It is defamatory. How dare you do that? And then he says, that's what happens in other states. That's why we had to do what we did. How dare you do that? And, parents know better, like just in Ohio. Ohio, nonetheless, 91% of parents said their kids' teachers are a positive role model for their kids.
Right. But isn't this one of those moments where you go, my kid's wonderful, but yes, all of those other teachers are doing what he says, and we have to destroy public education? Because we got a guy running for governor in this state who not only wants to cut education funding in half, but also wants to do what the right wing's been dreaming about and give money to parents to homeschool.
Yeah, I mean, this is, they have, since Milton Friedman, since the Brown versus Board of Education decision, the right wing, the extremist elements of the right wing, because a whole bunch of Republicans that love their public schools, the extremist elements of the right wing have been trying to undermine education, take money out for private schools, take money out for for-profit, and just basically undermine it. I don't know whether they're afraid of it or whether they just want, the market to prevail or privatization. But the bottom line is, what has been layered on that now is this level of fear and smear. And it does create fear. It's nonsense. It's defamatory. But they can't win the old-fashioned way. They can't win on ideas because they have none. So what they're doing is just creating fear and exacerbating grievance and tribalism.
Yeah, and destroying.
Yeah, it's the way in which you and I have talked about this before, and I remember the last time we talked about it, they smeared me about talking about it. But this is what DeSantis is doing, is the autocratic playbook.
Absolutely. And he's a smart, look, he a lot of people think of him in the same vein as Trump, not very bright. This guy has, Ivy League credentials. This is no dummy.
Yeah,
he knows exactly what he's doing.
He's an elitist. He's from the Ivy League, and, but he's deflecting in that kind of way because his wish for power overrides anything else.
And if it means tearing us apart and destroying public education, so much better for them, because that's the goal anyway, isn't it?
So, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it's what you have here in terms of this extremist group or of MAGA folks is that they're taking, like him or not, Trump. He created a cult following.
Yep.
All these new wannabes are trying to take that cult following away from Trump and make it their own. But what is at stake in their fight for power, their political fight for power, what's at stake is all of our freedoms, is our democracy, is the economic safety net we have right now, and children's futures in our schools. Because it's only through public schooling that any child really has a shot, where the government has to be accountable for making sure that that child at least gets reading, writing, arithmetic, and science and social studies. You don't get that. There's no accountability for that in homeschooling. There's no accountability for that in vouchers. And so what we in America believe as public school people is that we have an obligation to all kids, and that it takes resources, and that at this moment in time, after 2 years of disruption, we got to really focus on a couple of things. Help kids recover and thrive. Go back to the basics. Joy, emotional and social supports, but reading, science, pathways to their future. That's what we believe in.
Absolutely. Now, one of the other things I got to ask you, Randy, in looking at where we are, there's a lot of reports of teacher shortages, a lot of teachers leaving the profession because all of these arrows, all of these attacks, all of this heated rhetoric. How are we going to get to that place that you're talking about if the good people are leaving?
Well, part of the problem this year, and I'm glad it's been reported on, is that we've had a teacher shortage for a long time because people are not paid what they ought to be paid. There's what the Economic Policy Institute calls a teacher tax, that teachers are basically paid about 20 to 25% less than they can get for the same skills and knowledge in this hot market in non-teaching jobs. So, between long-term subpar compensation and long-term erosion of working conditions, which are students' learning conditions, and then on top of that, all of the effects of COVID, yet nothing was taken off their plate for the last school year. And then on top of that, all the blaming and shaming and fear-mongering, of course, it's a perfect storm. Of course there's a teacher shortage. But what we're seeing is this. Parents actually care about this. This is one of the major things parents care about. That's part of the reason why DeSantis had to actually say something about the teacher shortage. So what the AFD is doing is we're trying to problem solve it. And there are governors who have really helped us, like Governor Lujan Grisham. She came up with a really good plan this spring to help and raise teacher salaries, made it easier for people who retired to come back to substitute, did the Grow Your Own programs, which we need, which will help diversify the profession. those, vets, that's part of the Grow Your Own program. That's part of the Troops to Teachers program that we've had for years that Donald Trump killed and then Joe Biden brought back. And so, we're trying to problem solve all of this stuff right now with districts and with states. But the best way to do it, and costs not a dime, RESPECT. Create a climate of respect, because teachers want to make a difference in the lives of kids. What other profession takes money out of their pocket routinely when they don't get paid enough to make sure their classrooms are okay?
I love my kids' teachers, every one of them. I respect them, and look, I know I couldn't do what they do, and I'm grateful for the work that they do, and I'm grateful for the work that you do. And it's always great that you take some time and sit down and talk with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for everything you do.
As always, great stuff. Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Quick break back here in Pittsburgh for the Netroots Nation Conference. Right back.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day striking Teamsters in Minneapolis defied martial law. They stopped scab trucks, forcing the release of their strike leaders. Armed with bayonets and machine guns, the National Guard had patrolled the streets for nearly a week. They seized scores of strikers and union leaders and threw them into military stockades. Drivers were outraged. They defied Governor Olson and Major General Walsh, who, on behalf of the Citizens Alliance and trucking bosses, were determined to break the strike. Soon after strikers were imprisoned, drivers began chasing scab trucks across the city. Multiple reports poured in of picketers forcing trucks to stop. Some unloaded their cargo onto bridges. Others chased, captured, and damaged the scab trucks. Strikers ripped ignition wires out, forced scabs from the wheel, and then disappeared before police and the National Guard could arrive to retaliate. In just 3 hours, strikers had overturned nearly 70 trucks. Unable to stop the superior force of striking drivers, Bill Brown, Vincent, and Miles Dunn were ordered unconditionally released from the military stockades. Now, employers, the governor, and other strike-breaking agencies were eager to propose peace to federal mediators. But they proposed to scrap the terms of their earlier May agreement. In response, the leaders of Local 574 issued a general strike call. In it, they asked, quote, "Is there one man so blind as not to see that if 574 is allowed to go down to defeat under the brutal hammering of military despotism, the whole labor movement of the city will have been dealt a mortal blow? Union men, brothers, sisters, fellow workers, what are you going to do about it? We appeal to you for solidarity." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
The old home place is a classic theme of Americana, expressed in everything from Norman Rockwell paintings to Woody Guthrie's powerful folk lament, "Ain't Got No Home in This World Anymore." But for a heart-rending modern-day version of the emotional pull of home, you can't beat the poignant wail of a new song entitled "The Low-Down Down Home Atherton Rich Man Blues." Warning, you might need a box of tissues to get through this sad saga. Atherton, California, is a small town of some 7,500 souls who face a dreadful housing crisis. Unlike most situations, though, they are alarmed by a looming threat of too much housing. It seems that a recent California law requires cities to provide some affordable multifamily housing to help cope with a growing statewide shortage of homes, meaning Atherton needs to put in about 350 townhouse units as its share. Townhouses shriek the locals. This can't be. Unrich people live in townhouses. You see, Atherton is a precious enclave in the heart of the Silicon Valley, where only tech billionaires are allowed. The price of their mansions averages $8 million, with each one secluded on at least an acre of land. So, townhouse people? No way! As one affordable housing advocate put it, Atherton talks about multifamily housing as if it were a Martian invasion. In a letter to the city council, the multi-billionaire Andreessen family wailed that allowing more than one residence per acre, quote, will massively decrease our home values and quality of life. I'm sure you weep for them, so grab a tissue. Yet some Athertonians are at least trying to find solutions. One suggests that all of the residents' swimming pool cabanas should count toward the town's affordable housing requirements. This is Jim Hightower saying, if that won't make you cry, nothing will.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to Netroots Nation here in Pittsburgh. It's amazing who you run into in the hallways, and one of our favorite guests, Sarah Nelson, dropped by our booth here on Radio Row. Sarah is the president of the American Flight Attendants Union.
The Association of Flight
Attendants. I always screw that up, and I don't know why.
Well,
it's AFA. I get that.
A lot of people do it. We're living in America.
But it's so great to see you.
It's so great to see you too. Yeah,
and
always.
What brings you here?
I didn't think I was coming to Netroots this year, and then got a call from Abigail Disney. She is screening her new film, The American Dream and Other Fairy Tales. So she asked me to come speak on a panel, and I somehow made it work, fit in between other conventions.
You're all the place. You're going to be in Philly later today, Boston tomorrow. You're just racking up the miles. It's almost like you fly for a living.
That's kind of what I do. Yeah. It's good. Because while I'm traveling between conventions and rallies, I get to organize my people.
And you've got a campaign going on right now with Delta, right?
We do. It's the last major airline without a union for flight attendants, and they're incredibly anti-union, steeped in anti-union efforts for a very long time. The campaign has been on fits and starts for the last 25 years. 9/11, the crisis of COVID, and all the economic downturn around 2008. Those were not great times for organizing, but otherwise, Delta flight attendants have consistently been trying to get a union for 25 years. The last time they had an election was in 2010. That was the first election that we had where only the votes that were cast actually count. The rule under the Railway Labor Act was for over 70 years that if you didn't vote, it counted as a no vote. And we got President Obama to change that, but it was very shortly afterwards that Delta actually organized to increase the threshold to get to an election. So the law was changed. The oldest labor law in the country was changed in 2012 to change from 35% of workers showing interest in an election to 50%. And they have to be physically assigned cards. They're not electronic cards. So when we're talking about a workforce of between 23 and 24,000 workers, we're talking about over 12,000 signed cards that are only good for a year. And we are working on turning those out right now.
Yeah, no, I know you're doing a great job, but I look at this and I remember the anti-union Delta campaign where instead of paying dues, you could have a video game and you could go to a baseball game, and
You know what's so interesting about that? That became, a huge hot topic and really made the rounds everywhere when that was discovered. That poster had been sitting in the workplace for 18 months. So here you had Delta workers who were so steeped in just having the anti-union rhetoric around them all the time that people were walking by this, having this in the workplace every single day, and not even realizing that it was something so incredibly offensive. And it wasn't until that actually saw the light of day in the general public that the workers were like, oh my God, my company has such disrespect for me that they would talk with me in this way and disrespect my own choices in such a way and think that they can buy me off like this. That actually that made the rounds among the Delta workers, and they understood what kind of union busting nonsense that was.
Now, we're in an important moment. I mean, we had Chris Smalls on the program yesterday. There's this renewed interest in organizing because I think things like that people are finally tired of. Are we excited about the moment that we're in?
I mean, people are tired of the union busting. I would say that for 40 years we have been talking about inoculating people against the company anti-union campaign because the union busting was so prevalent everywhere, starting with Ronald Reagan firing the air traffic controllers and, making it a dirty word to strike, making it a dirty word to show any kind of worker power, and to unionize. And then they used bankruptcies and merger consolidation and all kinds of tools and, terrible lopsided trade deals to destroy unions and destroy good union jobs and make people so desperate that they'd be willing to accept anything. And that has driven us to a place where workers across this country are feeling the same thing. Two-tiered systems, the inability to access or be able to afford health care, the inability to retire, the inability to even spend time with your families because you're working 2 and 3 jobs just to get by. And the pandemic did a couple things. It shined a light on how workers in every single workplace are treated the same way, treated as disposable, even when they're called essential. And also that people are working themselves to death. And as Jennifer Bates said in front of Congress when she testified and as an Amazon warehouse worker, she said, we're the billionaires. We just don't spend it. In other words, we make all the wealth in this country. We're the ones with all the power. And she also said, we don't work. We don't live to work. We work to live. And that is something I think that people are feeling all over this country, that these corporations have been trying to make us feel lucky to have a job. And it's about time that we get together and make them feel lucky to have our work.
Yep, that's the message. I hope coming out of this and the message going forward. I know you got a lot to do, a busy schedule, lots of people pulling in every direction. I appreciate you sitting down with us for a couple minutes.
Absolutely, Rick. And I just want to note that our great organizer-in-chief, Bernie Sanders, is pulling together these rallies. I'm headed there today in Philly, tomorrow in Boston, as you mentioned. And these are working-class rallies. So this is taking one other tool that the corporate elite has been trying to use to divide us, which is to divide us along political ideologies, and get down to the fact that we're the working class. It's not about politics. It's about people. And our democracy is not a democracy that just sort of exists on its own. It exists with the backdrop of an economy based on capitalism. And capitalism doesn't give a shit about people. It only cares about profits and getting more and more from people. And as Heather McGhee said in Abigail Disney's movie, which people will get to see today for the first time, she said, they'll just keep pushing. Capitalism will just keep pushing until we go back to a plantation economy.
Yep.
That's where we're headed if we don't understand what this moment is, and that we have to push back and band together. And I want to really thank Bernie Sanders for recognizing that, this isn't about a political moment, it's about the working class moment. That's what these rallies are about.
And say hello to Bernie for us, because a little fun fact, Bernie was the first person I ever interviewed.
Very cool. And I know that fun fact, and I'm going to remind him of that today when I'm standing there with him with Sean O'Brien.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Sarah, I appreciate you taking time for us.
All right. Take care.
Sarah Nelson, president of the Association of Flight Attendants.
Solidarity forever.
There you go. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to Pittsburgh here at the David Lawrence Conference Center. I'm sitting here with one of the rock stars of the conference. Chris Smalls is the president of the Amazon Labor Union, America's first independent union led by workers. Chris, Thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
It's been a while since we've had you back on the program, and from the last time to this time, you're now a rock star.
Yeah, it has been. It's been crazy.
I love the enthusiasm of, yeah, you're a rock star. Yeah, it's been crazy.
No, that's just me. That's just me on day to day.
But, here's the thing. Everybody I talk to here is looking to you as the answer for the labor movement. We're in a moment where people are saying, hey, organizing, people are more interested now than they've been in a long time, and everyone's looking to you as the way forward. That's got to come with some weight on it.
Absolutely. It's a lot of pressure, but at the same time, I know that I have a strong team, and, our inspiration is inspiring millions of people. And, my job is just to continue that message and show that solidarity with everybody.
No, and you're doing a great job at it. But, what you did in Staten Island, the work that you did at JFK 8 and the organizing that you did, is that something that you can replicate in Albany, for instance, and in other places? Because I remember talking to you, and you were living in a hotel. You were there all the time. I mean, heavy labor intensive. Is that something that can be replicated time and time again?
Yeah, we're going to take some wins and losses, but we're going to take a shot. Taking a risk is the first step. And, Albany workers, they're ready to go. My job as the interim president is to go with the workers' decision. It's a Democratic union, and when the workers say they're ready to file their petition, I support that 100%. So whatever happens, but I know we're going to give it our all. And they have a great leader up there, Heather Goodall, and we're happy that they're ready to go. We're going to be behind them. No,
it's great to see all of this organizing, especially from young people and the bottom up, which for someone who's been in the labor movement and fighting for labor rights for better than 30 years, to see finally the kind of enthusiasm that I was hoping at every crisis point would come. I'm optimistic of the future for probably the first time in a long while. But the reality is I think our laws are so badly broken that I fear this moment gets bogged down in procedure. Any concern on that level?
No, not if I got something to do with it.
There you go.
They invited the wrong person to the White House already. Once you let me in, I get a glimpse of what the things that come in the future, and we're not going to stand for that. We're going to hold everybody accountable, and if it starts with our elected officials, I have no problem calling them out. As you've seen in the past. So.
No. You see, and I tell people, if you want to look at a master's class on how to organize and do, get grassroots, bottom-up organizing, look to what you've been able to do. Because you really haven't been political. You haven't staked a flag in the ground on either side of the political fence. You're talking about, hey, how do we make people's lives better? And I think that's what has to be done across the spectrum.
Yeah. I told Lindsey Graham, this ain't a left or a right thing. It's a workers thing. And it's true. We can't tie ourselves to political parties because we have to represent all workers. And I can tell you 8,300 people in Staten Island at Amazon. We're going to have people that's going to be Trump supporters and have different political views. So we can't exclude them. We have to just keep and build off of the workplace commonality and the workplace issues.
Because at the end of the day, wages, hours, conditions, that should be universal, right? Especially conditions. I mean, because I sit and I talk to workers from Amazon, and the conditions they talk about, the injury rates, all of the heat conditions. We just talked to somebody from San Bernardino when they had the walkout on Monday, and deplorable. And finally, people saying we've had enough. I think it's important. It's an important moment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we are pedal to the metal, trying to spread nationwide, just like Starbucks. We're joining picking lines with other industries across the nation, showing that solidarity. Me traveling across the nation on this hot labor summer tour, just trying to spread that message and keep that awareness and keep the iron hot. That's what we all have to do. We can't let this window of opportunity pass us.
Now, one of the knocks is that, you organized one facility. Are you ever going to get a contract? And part of me goes, okay, I understand the argument, but the other part of me is it's building worker power. This idea that you're empowering people to demand better, I think that's just as important as getting a contract in the near future.
Yeah, and the only way we get a contract is we have to be strategic and smart as well. Of course one building's not going to do it, but we have to inspire other buildings to get involved, which we're doing right now. And it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So it's a slow grind. I know things and people want things to happen overnight and right away after the victory. But it doesn't work that way, especially with these laws in this country and the way the NLRB process is. It takes months and it could take a year or two. But we're not going to give up. And if we can force them to come to the table sooner, we're going to exhaust all those options as well.
No, this really is a David and Goliath scenario. I mean, Amazon's a multi-trillion-dollar corporation. They're enormous. You're just a guy who a couple months ago was living in a hotel, bringing food to people in the parking lot, getting arrested for it. How's the rest of the labor movement reacted to that victory, and are resources coming to help you fight those battles? Because, look, Amazon's not going to run out of time or money or energy to fight you at every legal battle. I know you were at the AFT convention spending most of your time in a hotel room doing a deposition.
Yeah, definitely. We know that they're not going to give up on their end. Same thing with us. The resources are coming now. The labor movement is definitely fired up and inspired by our victory. And people are getting involved and donating to our funds. We're going to need all of that because we have to include the community in these other campaigns that will be launched as well. It didn't happen just by the people in the building. It happened with knowing that we have outside support, and we want to continue to grow that. So my job, once again, is to harness those resources for us, traveling, connected with different people, different unions, different locals, different organizations across this country that are going to get involved right away and help us with our campaigns.
Now, you've been doing the miles. I see you just about everywhere. You're the hardest working man in labor. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Christian Smalls. He's the president of the Amazon Labor Union. And there's been a lot of knocks lately. I know Stephen Greenhouse wrote a piece recently that the labor movement hasn't done enough on the organizing front, haven't done enough to support groups like yours. Is that fair?
That's true. It's fair, and it's okay to hold unions accountable, too. There's a lot of established unions with leadership that doesn't see eye to eye with the way, we're organizing and Starbucks is organizing because they're used to a certain style and tradition. But we're in a new school generation of organizing. This is a new face of labor. And obviously I'm not the traditional style suit and tie president that you'll see in the unions. So it's a little different, but they have to understand we're not going anywhere, and this is how it's going to be. We're in the 21st century, and we have to adapt to the times that we're in, and the corporations have no problem doing it. Labor can't be the same way. They have to make sure that the younger generation takes the torch and lead the way.
Yeah, at the end of the day, though, Chris, the reality is it's still old school organizing, still person-to-person, face-to-face, on the ground, community building, just as much as it is demanding better wages, hours, and conditions, no?
Yeah, but we have a lot more tools now. Social media is definitely huge in our campaigns, TikTok, things like that obviously wasn't around back in the 30s and the 40s. It was face-to-face and word-of-mouth and several conversations. But now we have creative ways, and we have to get creative because these corporations, they're infiltrating in ways that are just unimaginable with the amount of money that they're using. We're talking about donating to public schools, starting young, infiltrating our classrooms. The only way we do that is stopping them at the gates. And spreading them.
I'm glad you brought that up because we just had a conversation with Jeff Bryant the other day.
Yeah.
And he was explaining how Amazon in California has funded, the schools to be a partner in job training, where all it's really turned into being is job training for Amazon. It's not teaching the code. It's not teaching them any vocation. It's just training the next generation of cheap labor.
And also training them to become union busters. They're not only the classrooms at the bottom and kindergarten and beyond, they're talking about college courses where employee relations is a course for business. And we all know employee relations mean you're going to be a union buster.
Yeah.
So that's just the creativity that these corporations are using. They're using teenagers. I just left a Fortune 500 convention, got billionaires as 16-year-olds raising startup companies are going to be autonomous.